Let's take a look at the global context of compensation. Understanding international competition begins with managing differences and similarities. Global compensation practices are shaped by economic, institutional, organizational, and employee related factors that vary by country. Organizations must assess how much local laws and cultural norms constrain their compensation decisions. Companies can either align their pay practices with others or differentiate to gain a competitive advantage. Each approach has trade offs. Multinational corporations must balance home country practices with local country expectations when operating internationally. This balance often involves choosing between localization, adopting to local norms, and standardization, aligning with company standards. Key global compensation influences include social contracts, national culture, trade unions, financial markets, and managerial autonomy. Although we separate the factors in this discussion, they do not separate so easily in reality. Instead, they overlap and they interact. The employment relationship is more than an exchange between the employee and the employer. The social contract involves the government, employers, and employees individually or through associations or unions, and shapes their shared expectations. Effectively managing or changing employee compensation in any country requires understanding and sometimes reshaping this social contract, which varies across cultures. Although understanding differences in wage bargaining levels is important, it should also be understood that the social contract continues to evolve. The social contract also relates to the legal and regulatory environment for human resource decisions in each country. Wage flexibility depends on both bargaining centralization and regulatory limits like maximum work hours. Culture is shared mental programming that influence how people process information. The idea that compensation systems should align with national culture is based on an assumption that most people in a country share a consistent national character. Hofstede's framework of cultural dimensions, like power distance and individualism, is often used to explain how cultural traits might impact pay characteristics and practices across countries. While this perspective is popular, the actual influence of national culture on employees' acceptance of performance based pay and effectiveness of HR practices is often exaggerated. Reanalysis of Hofstede's data reveals that there is significantly more variation among individuals within a country than between countries, limiting the perceptive value of national culture. National culture can serve as a general starting point for understanding compensation preferences, but relying too heavily on these cultural averages can lead to poor decisions. Believing that all individuals or organizations within a country think alike ignores the wide range of attitudes and practices that exist within national borders. To effectively manage international compensation, it's critical to understand the unique economic, institutional, organizational, and individual factors that shape pay systems within a specific context. Understanding the full range of individuals within nations is even more important. Europe remains highly unionized. In Sweden, 71% of workforce belongs to unions. In the United Kingdom, 28%. In Italy, 33%. Asia is less heavily unionized. Japan's unionization rate is 18%, while South Korea's is about 10. In some countries, pay is set by collective agreements, even though workers may not be in a union or union members. In France, more than 90% of workers are covered by collective agreements, even though fewer than 10% are organized. In addition to having higher rates of unionization, as we have seen, workers in countries like Germany have the right to establish work councils, which must be involved in any changes to the pay plan. In China, labor unions are increasingly asserting themselves more strongly. Global differences in company ownership and financing play an important role in shaping international pay. In the United States, corporate ownership and access to capital is far less concentrated than in most other countries. 50% of American households own stock in companies either directly or indirectly through mutual funds or pensions. In Korea, six conglomerates closely linked with specific families control a significant portion of the Korean economy. In Germany, a small number of influential banks have ownership interests in most major companies. These patterns of ownership make certain types of pay systems almost nonsensical because ownership in the companies is not readily available to individual investors. For example, linking performance bonuses to increased shareholder value or offering stock options to employees makes little sense in large conglomerates in Germany, Korea, and Japan. However, ownership in small startups in the nations is outside the traditional channels, so these firms do offer stock options to attract new employees. Recent tax law changes in many countries have made stock options more attractive, but limited ownership of many companies remains the rule. One study found local enterprise workers prefer performance based pay more than federal enterprise workers. Managerial autonomy refers to the degree of discretion managers have to make total compensation decisions. It is inversely related to the degree of centralization and regulatory intensity. Most US and UK based organizations have greater freedom to change employee pay practices or to hire and downsize than most European countries. The centralized pay setting fund found in European Union countries limits organizations' autonomy to align pay to business strategy and changing market conditions. Governments and trade unions are not the only institutions to limit managerial autonomy. Corporate policies often do so as well. Compensation decisions may support corporate strategy but overlook local economic and social reality. Even with similar wages, differences in healthcare, living costs, and benefits complicate the picture of total rewards and compensation management. In many countries outside the US, national health care, often funded through payroll tax, reduces the value of health benefits as part of total compensation, since coverage is largely uniform across the population. Comparisons with foreign competitors can be misleading, as international data often skews towards US company practices and lacks comprehensive input from local and national firms. Nevertheless, substantial differences in labor costs do exist, and companies may find that it makes sense to move or grow employment in lower cost countries if productivity can be maintained at a workable level. If comparing total compensation is difficult, comparing living costs and standards across borders is even more complex. However, companies need such data to adjust pay for employees who transfer among countries. The objective is to maintain the same level of purchasing power. Pay systems differ widely across countries due to economic, political, and workforce differences. While it's helpful to examine national compensation trends, broad generalizations can be misleading. Even within a single country, companies like Toyota and Toshiba may adopt very different practices. The discussion of global pay systems is guided by a total pay model focusing on common elements such as pay objectives, competitiveness, internal alignment, employee contributions, and management. Despite national norms, compensation systems are evolving and increasingly diverse. A national system mindset assumes that most employers in a country adopt similar pay practices. Understanding and managing international compensation then consists mainly of comparing the Japanese to the German or the US to other national systems. It's a comparative method that will be useful in nations with centralized approaches. Base pay is not based on job evaluation or market pricing, nor is it attached to specific job titles. It's based on a combination of employee characteristics like career category, years of service, and skill. Seniority remains a major factor in determining base pay. Management creates a matrix of pay and years of service for each career category. Bonuses provide additional pay equivalent to 1 to 5 months of annual salary, depending on the level in which the organization and often the financial results of that organization. Generally, the higher up you are, the larger the percent of annual salary received as a bonus. A global study identified three compensation strategies for national companies: localizer, exporter, and globalizer. Localizers tailor pay systems to each country, allowing full independence from headquarters to meet local market needs. Exporters, in contrast, implement a centralized pay system designed at headquarters with minimal local adjustments to ensure consistency and ease of talent mobility. This approach promotes shared values and simplifies global compensation decisions using common tools, though it can face resistance. Globalizers also seek consistency, but emphasize collaboration between headquarters and local units to adopt and to evolve practices together. These strategies prioritize aligning pay systems with global business goals while allowing flexibility for local adaptation. International compensation is complex, but often disconnected from business strategy and performance goals. The main goal of expatriate pay is to preserve purchasing power and minimize inequity through innovation in this area has been minimal. Expat pay or expatriate pay systems aim to strike a balance, attractive enough to motivate employees without alienating local staff or creating future assignment reluctance. These systems typically assume expats will return home, but fairness is often judged relative to other expats or local peers, not just home country standards. Employees' willingness to accept international assignments varies based on personal factors like family, life stage, and career goals, especially between US and European workers. Research shows many expatriates face unclear career paths, lower pay, and limited advancement upon returning, with over half leaving their employer within a year. While some programs work well, there's little agreement on how to design effective compensation systems. Some corporations are building globalist teams, managers who work seamlessly across borders. To support the global flow of talent, some organizations are creating borderless or regional pay systems, though national laws and customs still heavily influence pay structure. Focusing on expatriate compensation may blind companies to the issue of appropriate pay for employees who seek global career opportunity. Ignoring these employees causes them to focus only on the local operations, their home country pay, and devote less attention to integrating operations in global firms. It is naive to expect commitment to a long term global strategy in which local managers have little input and receive limited benefits. Localizing top management in subsidiaries may reinforce differences in focus between local and global management.